Hi, everyone. Sorry I can't be there today. Well, I'm not really sorry because I'm at the beach, but I wanted to do a short video to explain Journal Club and what we're doing and why we're doing it, just to give you guys a heads up. Our first Journal Club is going to be on August 1st, so this is just to get you prepared and ready for it. Why do we do Journal Club? Here are your options for the various reasons why we might do Journal Club. You can take a second and look at those. But really, to answer the question, while it may be that I have personal unresolved issues about journal clubs in my education in the past, that's not actually why we're doing it. The actual reason is that we want you to be really excellent practitioners of evidence-based medicine. And I get that you all might kind of go, well, I don't really want to be that sort of EBM geek guy and learn all those statistics. That's not really the point of this. The point is the following. Evidence-based medicine is defined as the conscientious, judicious, and explicit use of current best evidence in making decisions about patient care. It involves the interaction of these three components over on the right-hand side here. The best evidence available, and you're being able to understand that evidence. That's what the literature reading and the statistics is all about, but it's only part of it. The next most important part is understanding and eliciting the patient's values, what they want to do with their health, and to what extent the research helps them achieve those goals. And then the clinician's judgment, or sometimes we call it clinical expertise, being able to understand somebody's risk for something, understanding their prognosis given a certain condition, understanding the context in which they live, economics and social and family context and all the other stuff that we as family physicians are trained to do. So when I say I want you to be evidence-based, it's because I want you to take all of these three things into account. Life is not a randomized controlled trial, as Dr. Greenwald told me when I was in residency. So you have to understand that weighing and valuing each of these components is really the point of evidence-based medicine, not just doing what this latest systematic review says. And so when we talk about I want you guys, and we as a faculty want you guys to practice evidence-based medicine, this is the kind of thing we're talking about. There was an article by a woman named Sharon Strauss way back in 2004 that talked about three definitions of EBM users, or EBM, how one might practice EBM. And one is as a replicator. And a replicator is just simply doing the same sort of thing that somebody you think is evidence-based is doing. And I've done this in the past. There was a cardiology consultant in Syracuse that would quote me chapter and verse of the latest research, and I felt comfortable sort of taking his word for what should be done, and oftentimes replicated his practice because of that. Mostly, I want you guys to be users, and that doesn't mean that you're reading stats and calculating a lot of statistical percentages or anything like that. It really means being critical about information sources and understanding where you're getting information, using predominantly evidence-based and what we call pre-appraised sources, having somebody else do the critical appraisal for you. So, for instance, choosing Dynamed as a reference source instead of UpToDate, subscribing to the POEMS emails, and I can talk to you about that at some point if you don't know what those are. Reading Dr. Greenwald's Take 3. Those are what I consider evidence-based or pre-appraised sources. Somebody's already done the work at looking at the evidence, being critical about it, and if you trust their methods generally, you can just take that information in and use that. Occasionally you will want to be able to do your own literature search, your own appraisal of original research, probably mainly more systematic reviews and guidelines. But so you'll want to be able to look at those from time to time. But predominantly you're going to be choosing sources for evidence where somebody else has done all that work for you. And then there are doers. So I'm a doer of evidence-based medicine. I create evidence-based products and those things. Dr. Greenwald is to some extent with his Take 3 and the other stuff that he does. One or two or three of you, or a handful of you, might be doers of evidence-based medicine at some point. I certainly hope so. But if you're not, that's not what we're trying to achieve. We're trying to get you all to sort of the user status. Now, some research that I did around that time ago, where I asked a bunch of experts what they would consider, sort of self-proclaimed EBM experts, what they would consider a useful metric or a way to think about how somebody's practicing EBM. And really it boiled down to, there were a certain number of things, being able to use Medline and yada, yada, yada. But a lot of it came down to personality characteristics and attitudes. Honesty, being honest about what you know and communicating that information honestly to patients. Skepticism, being inherently skeptical of the next thing down the road and waiting for some confirmatory evidence, etc. Curiosity, being curious about what else is out there, and do I need to go to the literature to see if I need to update my practice at all. And compassion, understanding that patients have a lot of needs about where their health is, and not every intervention fits every patient. So being able to get that information and integrate that with your decision is really important. So how do we do the journal club? What's the actual process? What am I going to ask you guys to go through starting on August 1st? Your individual responsibilities. Just to do an overview here, you will each present an article, that should be an article, once this year. You will each review a colleague presenting an article once this year. So overall workload wise, you're preparing something once and you're reviewing another colleague once. When you're going to that session, when you're showing up for journal club and you're not presenting, be attentive, be present, engage the presenters, your colleagues, ask questions, try to read and skim the article and figure out what's going on, be curious and ask questions. The third years that are assigned to present that day need to be leaders in this and lead their team and make sure they're not talking about the same thing or presenting duplicate information the whole time. There's a lot of wanting to, especially in anything you're doing, sorry about my phone, in anything you're doing, there's a lot of desire to be complete about everything and give the complete introduction and background. We don't need to do that, and I'm going to count on the third years this year to figure out how to distribute that amongst the other residents that are presenting that day. And then Dr. Perkins and I are available for help if you need help getting through some of this. So for reference materials, I have a wiki site, everybody but the interns knows about this already, that has tutorials on EBM principles. It has specific instructions that I want you all to read for the journal club, and has handy dandy worksheets. These worksheets are meant to help you step through the mechanisms of critical appraisal and just go step by step and make sure you cover everything. So I definitely encourage using the worksheets. You see the URL there, and so it's important that you go to that site, at least for the rules of our journal club. Look at that, and then if you want to use some of the tutorials on therapy articles, diagnostic test articles, or whatever, you're obviously welcome to do that. I know a couple of residents that went through those in detail last year found that they were helpful, so feel free to use that. The process, so individual residents, first years will be assigned an article from American Family Physician. That'll be the article of the day that the faculty running TLC will assign. Read over that, present a brief overview, and I mean brief overview. You have about 5 to 7 minutes for this. A brief overview of what the article is about and its general conclusions. Then you'll get to and all of this is 5 to 7 minutes. You'll present the SORT tables. SORT stands for Strength of Recommendation Taxonomy. It's basically a set of recommendations out of that article that have evidence grades on them, and they're in every AFP article that's published now. They have that section. So look at that and present that table, because that's at least the clearest evidence-based information we have. Understand what is behind those recommendations, each of those recommendations, and then at the end of your presentation, interns, tell us one thing that you'll stop doing and one thing that you'll start doing as a result of what you learned in this article. Okay, and the goal for this is to get used to reviewing what actually are pretty good evidence-based review articles in the American Family Physician. Look at summaries of evidence and strength of recommendation statements and understand what they're about, and remember that you are, at all these times when you're looking at evidence, you're trying to figure out how to apply it to your practice. For the second years, what you'll do is you'll take that AFP article and you'll look in the reference list, and you'll go through and find an original research article, preferably either a therapy or a diagnostic test article that looks interesting to you, okay? Some of these AFP articles, it can be hard to find either therapy or diagnostic test articles. Sorry about the phone again. But talk to Dr. Perkins or me or your senior resident for the day and ask them if they have any assistance or advice for you about which article to pick. I say therapy and diagnostic test articles because they're the most straightforward articles to use. Sometimes harm or etiology articles or prognosis articles are a little bit less straightforward. And I want you to stay away from systematic reviews and guidelines for right now, that we save that for third year. Using the handy dandy worksheets that are available on the wiki site. Sorry, my phone is just going crazy. On the wiki site, you'll find the handy dandy worksheets. Use those to critically appraise that article that you're presenting. In the following sections, look at the validity, look at the results, and the applicability. And you should be able to get through that critical appraisal. Present that critical appraisal. Let us know how good that article was and what the results of each of. It doesn't have to and shouldn't be very long or detailed, but give us a sense of whether we should be paying attention to this article. The goal is to look comfortably at original research to get an idea of what the important validity results and applicability concepts are, and again, to see if it's applicable to your patient. And for the third years, again, from that same AFP article, choose a guideline or a systematic review for the third years. You're going to be looking at sort of a more complex set of evidence here. Use the handy dandy worksheets. There are worksheets for each of those. And critically appraise those. Go through all the steps of critically appraising the systematic review and the guideline. Present all those. And then your role, remember, is sort of as leader of the team for that day. Help the intern in the second year coordinate their presentations, avoid duplication, that sort of thing. Your goal to be able to critically appraise guidelines and systematic reviews. Again, by the time you go into practice, I would expect you guys to be able to pick up a guideline or a systematic review when you're in your practice and be able to implement that. So that's the sort of goal for your ability to critical appraise things. And then leading teams is another goal. All right, reviewers. So everybody will be paired with a reviewer that day. So if you're not presenting, if you're a third year, you have a third year that's reviewing your presentation. And there's a handy dandy worksheet for that, believe it or not, that they're on the wiki, and then they'll also be in the classroom. It's just a few simple questions to sort of let the presenter know how well they're doing, whether they're presenting clearly, whether they're projecting and doing all the presentation skills well, but also whether they're explaining the evidence correctly and you understand their presentation. Be nice, be collegial, and that's usually not a problem with these. What I want to emphasize a little bit more is don't pull your punches too much. Make sure if you're not understanding a concept that they talk about, or you wanted to know something more about a particular concept that they talked about or about the article, write that in the feedback. That's good feedback for them, and we're all here to learn. So it's perfectly okay to put meaningful comments in there. We're going to take those sheets and send them back to the presenters. And I'm going to ask the presenters we'll send them back by email, and the presenters should email us back saying what they would change as a result of that feedback. So we close the whole loop there. You present, you get some feedback, and then you say what you're going to do to respond to that feedback. And it's important that I get those emails back. Final thoughts. Remember, all these presentations should be brief. Total of 5 to 10 minutes, 5 for the interns, maybe 10 for the second years, maybe more like 7 or 8 for the third years, okay? So really focus on brevity and not presenting a lot of information that's already been presented. Practice at home if you need it. It's always helpful to run through these things at home. It would have helped a lot here if I turned off my phone, for instance. As presenters, teach your colleagues about the EBM stuff in addition to the medical content. We got to start talking about these concepts a little bit more. What is randomization? What is allocation concealment? Nobody seems to understand that stuff. Do you understand how we got the likelihood ratios or the sensitivity and specificities out of the article? Make sure you're talking about that in addition to the medical content. And then Kathy Smith will be emailing the assignments for our August session and later assignments. So we'll try to get those out pretty quickly. They may already be out by the time you see this video. And that's all I have. Have a good rest of the TLC, and I will see you next week.